cher David Cameron. Je voulais d'abord remercier nos équipes qui ont travaillé pour l'organisation de cette réunion.
French President thanking those who organized the summit.
Et remercier toutes les autorités régionales, départementales, locales.
Also thanking the regional authorities and the officials who were involved in organizing the summit.
Correspond aussi à un centenaire. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle nous nous sommes retrouvés dans ce cimetière de Pozières, là où vous-même, vous étiez venu, alors âgé de 16 ans, pour visiter ces lieux de souvenirs de ce qu'a été l'une des plus féroces batailles, la bataille de la Somme, avec les nombreuses victimes qui
Here the French President talking about the Battle of the Somme
dans ces cimetières.
near Amiens.
Je rappelle que
Francois Hollande and David Cameron attended a ceremony to commemorate the centenary of the World War I battle.
payé un lourd sacrifice pour que notre
Here he's
pays
talking about the
puisse être
huge number of victims, those who sacrificed their lives.
Je veux saluer la mémoire de ces soldats tombés.
He's saying he'd like to salute the memory of those soldiers who fell.
Le Royaume-Uni et la France, de continuer à porter l'esprit de paix et de faire en sorte, là où nous pouvons agir, de joindre nos efforts, notamment au
It's important for Britain and France to join forces
permanent, de manière
with a motive towards peace,
régler les conflits qui ensanglantent une partie du monde et surtout créent des flux de réfugiés dont ici nous savons ce qu'ils peuvent représenter. Nous avons donc tout au long de ces heures de travail, avec les ministres des Affaires étrangères comme avec les ministres de la Défense et de l'Intérieur,
says a lot of work has gone into the meeting also with other ministers.
que la France et le Royaume-Uni partagent les mêmes objectifs.
He says both countries share the same objective.
C'est vrai pour la Syrie, où
It's true for Syria.
cessez-le-feu, et nous faisons en sorte que cette période puisse être utilisée pour apporter une aide humanitaire indispensable à
Working together,
des villes martyrs, je pense notamment à Alep,
bringing humanitarian aid to parts of Syria,
que cette accalmie puisse offrir une opportunité pour les discussions et les négociations qui doivent
and
reprendre
hopefully
à
that
Genève.
the efforts made can lead to
Sur tous les
a
acteurs,
solution to the crisis,
pour que d'abord il n'y ait pas de reprise des bombardements et qu'ensuite il puisse
to make sure there's no more
vraie négociation.
bombardments, that there's a true negotiation that takes
La
place,
transition puisse être enfin engagée.
and that there can be a transition of power.
Protagoniste de ce conflit et aussi sur la Russie pour qu'elle comprenne bien que nous avons besoin aussi de sa participation.
He's talking about the importance of having the various partners working on this together, including Russia.
Il y a une opposition qui ne se confond pas avec Daesh et que notre adversaire, c'est Daesh.
Also talking about the importance that the main enemy is ISIL,
Aux Turcs,
or Daesh, as he calls them.
également une responsabilité et qu'ils doivent faire en sorte qu'ils puissent, là aussi, comprendre que l'intérêt pour la stabilité de la région, c'est un accord. Nous avons
And for the importance of the region, Bashar al-Assad also has to understand
des positions,
the importance of what's being done to achieve stability in the region.
un gouvernement puisse enfin être installé et qu'il puisse y avoir un appel à la solidarité internationale, appel auquel aussi bien le Royaume-Uni que la France répondront. Nous voulons enfin que nous puissions éviter qu'il y ait davantage de réfugiés. Nous aurons une discussion
Here the French President talking about the need to make sure that there are
Conseil européen et nous avons partagé
no more
les objectifs.
refugees or
D'en parler avec
more refugees leave Syria.
dès demain Nous aurons parallèlement avec David Cameron.
He says there'll be meetings with Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, also with the Russian President, with regards to Syria and the migrant crisis. And he says they've talked about the refugee crisis. And he says they have to look at how migrants can be returned to their countries. Funds have been released to help the countries where the migrants are first arriving as well. And the latest packages announced by Europe, they're needed as well.
Transport dangereux pour ces réfugiés, d'où le rôle de l'OTAN. Et il se trouve que là aussi, nous pouvons agir ensemble.
He's talking about the role of NATO as well, crucial in this,
La Grèce doit être également aidée pour
making sure that there are no security concerns.
Et nous-mêmes devons
also mention there Greece, the role it has to play in Turkey.
Et pourront permettre des réadmissions, mais aussi des relocalisations, de prendre notre part. Sur tous ces sujets-là, nous...
Talk about the cooperation in terms of relocating the migrants.
Vous avez l'esprit déjà de ce que l'Europe doit faire. Elle doit être solidaire.
Europe must be united on this, has to be efficient. There has to be solidarity as well.
Le Royaume-Uni prépare pour ces prochains mois. Nous avons eu l'occasion 2 jours et 1 nuit d'en discuter ensemble avec David Cameron. Quand je dis ensemble, nous n'étions pas que tous les deux, mais nous avons trouvé des formes, nous trouvons des modalités qui permettent au peuple britannique de décider en conscience de ce que...
Yeah, he's talking about the referendum that Britain is going to be holding on EU membership. He says he knows that David Cameron has a lot of negotiating to do in the future.
Du Royaume-Uni, c'est l'intérêt de l'Europe.
The interest for Britain to stay in the European Union, it's in the interests of Europe, and it's for the people of Britain to decide.
Par rapport à cette question des réfugiés, et j'y reviens notamment pour Calais.
And here he wants to talk about the situation in Calais to do with migrants. He says this city and this region is suffering, and there's a lot of concern.
Nous devons faire en sorte que ces réfugiés qui veulent aller au Royaume-Uni, alors même que le Royaume-Uni ne peut pas ou ne veut pas les accueillir.
He says
Britain
can't welcome all of these migrants. It's not in the Schengen space, Schengen area. The migrants can use their rights to be welcomed to France.
Qui est vécu depuis des mois, et aussi bien par les autorités locales que par la population. Les ministres de l'Intérieur.
Everyone's facing difficulties in this, the people and also the local officials.
Sur les questions qui seront posées, il y a moins de migrants et de réfugiés à Calais qu'il y a quelques semaines. Nous faisons en sorte que ceux qui y restent puissent être dignement accueillis, mais il y a...
But it's a very difficult situation, he says. But there are systems now in place to avoid such things as human trafficking, for example. And there's also the issue of the underage migrants, minors, among those in the camp. And we've talked about this as well. And we've talked about if those minors have family, for example, in the UK, that they be welcome there. And there'll be some points on this that David Cameron will talk about. There's also been some discussion at this summit amongst the ministers concerned, the different ministers.
De 2010, et c'est à partir de ce traité qu'il y a eu
There's been progress in some other areas.
communes, mais qui se sont traduites également dans des programmes qui ont pu aboutir à ce que, par exemple, au mois d'avril, il puisse y avoir une
For example, in April, there was agreement about an intervention force, Franco-British intervention force, and this is a great achievement, says the French President.
beau résultat de ce que nous sommes capables de faire ensemble.
We've got increased cooperation also with defense.
Une coopération de plus en plus poussée. Et enfin, vous savez que la France et le Royaume-Uni sont deux pays qui disposent d'une force de dissuasion.
Of course, France and Britain is working together
Nous puissions en réduire le
on this special force, making it more efficient.
Enfin,
We've also been talking about the economic situation after our climate conference that we had in Paris.
sur le climat,
There's been great cooperation on all levels, the G7, the G20.
participation à tous les niveaux.
The UK has been more than an ally. It's been a real partner in this
Plus qu'un
conference.
partenaire dans la réussite de cette conférence.
This in terms of nuclear energy, renewable energy.
En termes aussi d'énergie nucléaire, de modernisation, c'est ce qu'on appelle le projet Inkelpol.
And we can talk about the intelligence project, important for France and the UK.
Aussi bien pour le Royaume.
There's a real spirit of sharing and working together, he says.
Qui nous anime. Nous voulons travailler ensemble. Nous sommes.
We're, of course, two neighbours, he says. Britain will stay an island. Of course, there's the Eurotunnel, but we're neighbours, but there's the water between us. But yes, this friendship remains strong.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Francois. It's very good to be here with you today. And this summit has been about how Britain and France stand together to keep our people safe. And there was nowhere more fitting for us to meet today than here in Amiens, where a century ago 600,000 British and French soldiers were killed or injured fighting for our freedom. Visiting the Pozières cemetery this morning brought home again the humbling scale of that sacrifice. And that's why I'll be here again in July to honour all those who gave their lives at the Battle of the Somme. Throughout the last century, Britain and France stood shoulder to shoulder in the defence of our values and our way of life, and we do so again today. The horrific terrorist attack in Paris last November were, as I said at the time, an attack on us all. And Francois and I have talked today about the measures we must take to defeat this evil, about how we can strengthen our bilateral security relationship, and how we can work together to tackle the migration crisis. And I want to say a word on each. First, we need a comprehensive strategy to defeat the threat from Islamist extremism, both at home and abroad. Since the attack in Paris, British fighter planes have joined their French counterparts, carrying out military strikes against Daesh in Syria as well as in Iraq. Our action is degrading Daesh's capability, and they are now struggling to hold territory that they once confidently claimed. We also need an end to the civil war in Syria and a government in Damascus that can bring peace and stability to that country. We welcome the latest truce. It could provide an opportunity to make progress at next week's peace talks, but these will only succeed if there's a change of behaviour by the Syrian regime and by its backers. That is why tomorrow Francois and I, together with Chancellor Merkel, will speak with President Putin. Russia needs to end its attacks on Syrian civilians and the moderate opposition, and accept that there has to be a transition away from Assad to a new leader who can reunite Syria and bring peace and stability to that country. We've also discussed the importance of tackling the threat of Islamist extremism in Africa, and we've agreed to step up our efforts in Nigeria and across the Sahel, including training regional forces and supporting the multinational Joint Task Force in its fight against Boko Haram. We also need to protect ourselves from radicalised extremist Muslims here at home, so we've agreed to strengthen our counter-terrorism cooperation, particularly on information sharing, on transport and on aviation security. Turning to our bilateral defence cooperation, our ability to detect threats and act on them including militarily, is vital if we're to defeat the scourge of terrorism. We've already seen how we can use unmanned aerial vehicles to protect us from the terrorist threat, and today, Britain and France, we've agreed to jointly invest £1.5 billion to develop the next generation of unmanned combat air systems. This will be the most advanced of its kind in Europe, securing high-end engineering jobs and expertise in both the United Kingdom and France. Finally, we've discussed the migration crisis facing Europe. The United Kingdom has not faced anywhere near the scale of migrants coming to Europe as other countries because we're outside Schengen and we retain control of our borders. And in Calais, we've worked together with the French to strengthen security to deter migrants from trying to enter Britain. I want to thank President Hollande for his cooperation, and today I can announce that we will invest an additional £17 million in priority security infrastructure in Calais to assist the work of the French police. The money will go towards efforts to move people from the camps in Calais to facilities elsewhere in France, and we will fund joint work to return migrants not in need of protection to their home countries. The real challenge is in the eastern Mediterranean, where we need to break the business model of the criminal smugglers and dissuade people from embarking on a perilous journey in search of a new life in Europe. That is why the NATO mission is so important, and we'll meet in Brussels on Monday to discuss what more we can do within the EU to tackle this problem. So I think this has been an important summit. We stand here today as leaders of two strong nations who will always stand together in the defence of our values and our liberties. That cooperation will continue for years to come, just as it has throughout our history. But we should be clear how our partnership within the European Union makes a tangible difference to the scale and the breadth of what we can achieve together. It was through the European Union that we imposed sanctions against Russia when it illegally invaded Crimea almost 2 years ago. It was through the collective economic muscle of the EU that our sanctions brought Iran to the negotiating table and put a nuclear bomb beyond their reach. It is through cooperation and intelligence sharing with our European partners that we best fight cross-border crime and terrorism, giving us strength in numbers in what is a dangerous world. We both firmly believe that our membership of the European Union allows us to amplify our strength, projecting greater power internationally, increasing the security of our citizens and boosting the competitiveness of our economies. We are both strong, proud nations, clear about our influence in the world and clear that our membership of the European Union enhances that role rather than detracting from it. We are stronger, safer and better off within a reformed European Union. Thank you, Francois, again for welcoming me here today, for your friendship and for continued partnership in ensuring the safety, the security and the prosperity of all our peoples. Thank you.